Hello, everybody. This is Grayson Harris. Welcome back. Today, we are joined by Patrick Callihan. He is the CEO of Tech Impact, and they are leveraging technology to really increase social impact across the nonprofit space. Patrick, tell me a little bit more. First of all, thank you for joining, and tell me a little bit more about the work that y'all are doing and how you're achieving that mission.
Yeah, good to see you, Grayson. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Tech Impact, as you mentioned, is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is pretty simple. It's to leverage technology for social impact, and we do that in a few different ways. The first is really around capacity building, and within capacity building, which is very broad in itself, we do all kinds of things. We do a lot around educating nonprofits with the use of technology. We hold webinars, seminars, conferences, all of those types of things. Then we do some work around integration. So actually helping the nonprofits move to, cloud computing platforms
Mhm.
or to software that, enables their organizations. And then we also provide consulting services and then ongoing support. So we're supporting about 400 nonprofit organizations nationally that represent about a little over 10,000 what I would call endpoints or people that we support every day through help desk and things like that. So that's capacity building. And then, within workforce development, we work with young people, primarily 18 to 26 year olds that don't have college degrees. And we train them for jobs in technology. And then, really, I should say careers, because the way it works is young folks can come to us, at no charge for 16 weeks of training. We help then get connected to employment. And once they've been employed for a year, they can come back for additional certifications and training. So kind of a stackable certification process that leads to careers in middle skilled, jobs within IT.
I'm really excited to dive into both of those kind of core pillars. I did just read that y'all graduated your first class out of Nashville. Tell me a little bit more about how that went and also the synergies that you see between the workforce development and readiness and then that core kind of consulting and capacity building services that y'all.
Yeah, sure. So, the workforce development programs are very localized. So we hold those in Wilmington, Delaware, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Las Vegas, and our most recent, expansion is into Nashville, which is what you saw as our first graduating class in Nashville. We've been doing that, for over a decade and have, it was actually our 79th graduation. We've
Amazing.
had over a
Congrats.
thousand young people go through that program. And then, interestingly enough, we actually hire some of those folks ourselves and they become our workforce helping nonprofit organizations with their technology. We don't hire all of them. We don't have a staff of
Yes.
1,000 people or anything, but when we have openings, we give preferential treatment to the young people that we serve. So in a way, it's kind of full circle mission. We're training people that for jobs in technology, then we're hiring and then we're providing technology services to nonprofit organizations.
That is amazing. And on that side of providing those services, tell me a little bit more because I know that y'all have the capabilities of kind of completely taking over that help desk kind of process. Where does it kind of fit in? Is it always kind of that full service, or is there kind of some tiers to that?
Yeah, we try to meet nonprofits where they are, right? And we do things like assessments to understand what their maturity level is in technology. Just for the purpose of really helping them understand, kind of where they are, versus maybe best practices so that they can then think about what investments they would like to make in order to make their nonprofit, more efficient, more effective, reach more people, whatever their goals are in their own strategic plan. We try to help them understand how technology can help enable some of that. So it could be something as simple as that, just an assessment, right? But it could be then lead to a project for a nonprofit. Say they want to move away from server technology and move toward cloud computing, or they have a new accounting system they want to get in place. Really just about anything. So sometimes it's just project-based work that we're doing for these organizations. Then often that leads to kind of the full service that you're talking
Mhm.
about, which is sort of outsourcing their technology. So, basically we become their technology arm.
Gotcha.
And, when their associates have questions, they call our help desk, they meet with our account managers to think about, what projects need to happen in their organizations and so forth. So, it could be as simple as a project. It could be, much more enveloping, their entire organization. So it really depends on what they're looking for or what they need.
In terms of those needs within that tech space, it changes constantly, from what I understand, especially over time and now with the rise of AI. I know that you've been at the company for, I think, over 17 years. Tell me a little bit more about how what you've seen in terms of the changing of needs over that time, and maybe what is the biggest surprise over the last year that you wouldn't have maybe thought that would be a need within the space maybe 15 years ago.
Oh, some good questions there, Grace. And in 17 years, I've seen a lot, right? So, it's interesting. I had a consultant tell me years ago, like, well, your services aren't going to be needed because everyone's going to go to the cloud and it's going to simplify everything, and everyone's going to be great. And so, I kind of laughed like you did. I said, well, we'll see, because, while technology evolves, and certainly, at one time cloud computing was a big thing, right? Just getting off of an Exchange server, getting to Office 365 or Google or what have you. But it didn't make things less complicated, right? There was actually, it becomes more complicated because there's more things to think about. There's more. Cybersecurity has been a huge issue for nonprofits. Nonprofits have been targets of cyber crimes, and it happens, I mean, almost daily. We see it. So it continues to be an issue. So what do you do about that? You try and stay ahead of it, right? You try and see where the issues are coming up, and then help the nonprofits think through, how do they fortify their organization? What are the right tools that they need in place? What are the right processes, procedures, policies that they need in place? So we help organizations with that. Yeah, I mean, certainly technology evolves, and now the hot button is around AI, right? And AI is interesting because it's been around a long, long time, but really what's facilitating AI is these massive data centers, so the ability to process a ton of information in a very short period of time. And that's why you're seeing investments from Microsoft and Google and OpenAI in building new data centers, because it requires a lot of processing power, some of this technology. So, you know, AI is a very broad topic. I think you have to kind of get down to, well, what does AI mean for a nonprofit organization? And I think right now, what we're seeing is a lot of use of generative AI, and chat bots and things like
Yeah,
that.
copywriting.
Yeah, and that's the beginning. I caution nonprofits to think about how they use AI and where they're using it, because some of those things are public domain, right? If you go down to free chat GPT and you're putting your data out there, you're putting your data out there for everyone. So you want to look at the licensing agreements. You want to understand, should I get an enterprise level, license for my
100%.
organization if I'm going to use it in a way that's, proprietary to my organization? So that's certainly one aspect of it. I think right now, what we're hearing a lot about is agentic AI, right? So building agents
Yep.
that, start to tackle processes that might be, some level of automation within the organization. So things that are repeatable, that could be done, by an agent, if you will. And that's very new. And we're looking at that very closely, even internally, to say, okay, what things would we do as an organization? And then we're going to pilot a few of those, and then we're going to measure those, right? Because one thing I think that's important is, like, any investment you make in technology. I mean, technology is never a silver bullet, right? It requires people and processes, and the technology.
Opportunity cost.
Yep. So I think, ROI is an important calculation in all this. If I build an agent, and what's it cost me to run that agent? Because now the models are all changing to consumption based, right? And it's
Yeah.
really even hard to predict, what consumption am I going to use by running that agent within my organization? How much are they going to charge me? And so I think, I don't know, the best thing, statement that I've stuck with for a long time is, around technology, is like, think big, start small, and move fast, right? Like
Yep.
maybe have the capability to handle a lot of the work that we're doing today. So think big about that. Where are all the areas that could be impacted? But then start small, get a pilot, test it out, make sure it works, see what it's going to cost you. But basically, move fast. Like, don't be afraid of it, right?
Yeah.
Like get in there, learn, see what's good for your organization. And it's going to vary from organization to organization. But yeah, so certainly I think, technology is evolving. It's constantly evolving. And we're in a pretty big storm at the moment, I think.
Percent. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but one way that your organization is kind of leveraging AI is through this data lab that y'all have. Tell me a little bit more about that data lab that kind of you're hoping to bring with that service to nonprofits in terms of creating those reporting, the analytics, and just expand on that.
Yeah. So we do have a data lab. That's kind of in our innovation space, and it's comprised of about a dozen folks that are data scientists, data engineers, some front end developers, and primarily right now they're working on large data sets for state government as well as for larger nonprofits. So some of that is just, helping these organizations think through what data they're collecting, how they're collecting it, where they're storing it, and then how it's accessed. So it always starts with data. The thing is with AI or machine learning or anything else, it's like garbage in, garbage out.
Of
So
course.
you still need to really solid data to do any of these things. And so we always start there. And then I think moving from that, you're trying to problem solve. So in this new world where there's lots of data, like it's about taking some of those data sets and sort of meshing them together to get insights, right? I'll give you an example. Like in the state of Delaware, we're looking at like, infectious diseases, right? And we can look at that through, insurance data to understand where people are filing insurance claims for treatments of certain kinds of diseases. And we can do that down to the census tract level, right? So now we have that data and we kind of understand what's going on in terms of diseases around the state. Then we can overlay that with different data, looking at like nursing certifications, for instance, and what certifications do the nurses have? And when you start to overlay that data, you start to see gaps, right? Okay, in Southern Delaware, which is a popular area to retire, geriatrics is a big issue, but yet there are not enough geriatric nurses, certified geriatric nurses in that area. So what do you do with that information? Well, one, you've just learned it, right? And you've learned it from data. And now you can start to affect policy with that. Should the state invest in workforce development in that region or encourage more nursing in that region to address the shortages of geriatric nurses, right? So you start to see, the data comes from different places, but once you start to look at it holistically, you learn a lot. And some of that's through visualization, through mapping and heat mapping and things like that. So a lot of that takes place within our data lab. From a nonprofit standpoint, you're looking at things like outcomes, right? Maybe you want demographics on the people you're serving and you want to know, like, is your program affecting the change that right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of that can be told through data, through data visualization that can be shared with constituents, whether they're board members or funders or
That's storytelling, but it's
yep.
backed up by that strong data, the data to back it.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, everyone talks about storytelling with nonprofits and storytelling's great. I love storytelling, but when you have the data to then back it up, it becomes that
Yeah.
much more powerful.
100%. What you mentioned you work with over 400 nonprofits. If you could just share, a quick way that you would see across the nonprofit space having a positive impact on these organizations that you work with that would be easy to implement for our listeners, what would something like that be?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I mean, one, once an organization decides they're going to outsource, their technology, it allows them better focus on the things that really matter to them, right? Very few nonprofits, we're probably one of them, go into the nonprofit sector thinking, I want to address technology, right? They don't. They have their own missions and that, whether it's, helping people or saving animals, rescuing animals, or, continuing education, whatever those things are, that's where they want to focus on, right? They want to meet their mission. They want to further their mission. So, once the technology goes to the background of that, then gives them more focus and time to think about that. But also along the way, they're getting coached because we want to understand what their mission is. We want to help them, reach the goals that are in their strategic plan. And where technology makes sense, we can help them think about, how to implement that so that they are achieving their goals. Does that answer your question there, Grayson? I don't know.
If you had like a piece of advice that you would share with someone within a nonprofit space that you would see that would fill a gap that is often overlooked, what would something like that be?
Yeah, I think, it's important to assess where you are and against best practices, right? So I think cybersecurity is definitely one of those areas. And we're seeing this more and more because organizations are getting cybersecurity insurance policies, right? And the insurance companies are becoming more savvy about cybersecurity. And they're saying, okay, well, if we're going to insure you, insurance companies really hate paying out,
Yeah.
claims.
What are you doing to make sure you don't have a cybersecurity breach?
Exactly. And so they're getting more and more savvy, and we see these questionnaires that are sometimes many, many pages in length that are really drilling down into their practices, into the tool sets they're using and so forth. And so, we help nonprofits go through those things because some of them, they just may not have the knowledge, to even know how to answer the question, right? Or why that question is important in the first place. So that kind of goes back to assessing and looking at kind of where they are against best practices, which is where the insurance companies want you to be. And then how do you fill those gaps, right? I mean, it could be something as simple as multi-factor authentication, right? And we use that every day in our banking systems and, all kinds of things. But you'd be shocked to know how many nonprofits still are not embracing like, multi-factor and things like email or SharePoint or their filing system. And, that's just exposure for the nonprofit. If someone gets in there, gets in those files, encrypts them, and then holds them, for ransom, essentially, which I mean, honest to God, happens every day. Or even things like social engineering, right? Like, they go to the
The
website,
human side of it.
they get the CEO's name, they
Yep.
start doing spoofing emails to people, and next thing you know, money's getting wired out. Well, that isn't even like a, network issue. That's just a policy issue, right? Like, you know, you shouldn't send money till you talk to someone, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
policy, right? Because, people, they're getting really, savvy about how they approach these cyber crimes. So we have to get savvy in return and develop policies that help prevent that.
I love that. A follow-up question on that. How much of the cybersecurity problems that you're seeing arise come from the technology piece versus that human and training piece?
Yeah.
Because generally, from what I understand, that human piece is generally going to be the weakest link within any system. So how much of it is that training versus the tech?
Yeah, I mean, we use some products that help train staff to recognize things that, could make them vulnerable by clicking on a link or something like that. And we don't do it to call anyone out. We do it to help them realize like, hey, I really need to stop and think. I mean, I had some in my inbox this morning already, and they're kind of counting on you like moving too fast, transacting, and you just click on something, and next thing they could be inside your network or gathering data from you that they'll use, in other ways. So I think, we're seeing definitely more and more social engineering because more and more nonprofits have moved to cloud computing systems, which are pretty fortified by the cloud computing companies themselves, right? Not to say people can't get in there. They do. And Microsoft, and others have problems all the time with cyber issues, but they're more likely to recognize that earlier because they have a whole team of people looking at that, where a nonprofit really doesn't have a team of people looking at that. So, I think social engineering definitely is becoming more pervasive, over time.
Amazing. Well, as we're coming to the end here, how would a nonprofit tuning in get involved with Tech Impact? How would they reach you?
Yeah, I mean, the best way is to, go to our website, which is techimpact.org. There's some information out there about the different services we offer, about the different programs that we have, and then certainly filling out, an inquiry form will get you a response, right away.
Amazing. Well, Patrick, thank you for coming on and sharing more about what you're seeing with the nonprofit space in terms of cybersecurity and just technology and how it's kind of changed and adapted over time. And thank you for coming on and taking time to share with us.
You bet, Grace, and nice to spend time with you.